This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we haven't done an audio podcast on Spotify for podcast in a while because we've been working on an album called Polypodiophyta, and that is a concept album about ferns and fractals and plants and music. Specifically, expansive sound music, which is our style of music where we combine multiple genres with hardware, analog, and digital synths. And instead of digital audio workstations, we use multi-track recorders like the Zoom LiveTrack L8 and the Zoom R20, in combination with tools like the Akai Force, which is a very powerful songwriting tool that we combine with synthesizers like the Roland JD08 and the Moog Grandmother. In addition, we use synthesizers and Euroracks, products from Make Noise like the Mats utility module for doing CV editing of controlled voltage signals on a Eurorack, the Arturia Mini Brute 2S, Roland Juno GI, Roland JDXI, sequencers like the Arturia, one of the things that we like to use, the BeatStep Pro, and synthesizers like the Mother 32 from Moog, which is a modular, and the Math, not the Maths, but the DFAM, which is the drummer from Another Mother. So on this album, it's got all these hardware and synthesizers, analog or digital, but they're all synthesizers that you have to kind of, not sample, you're playing them. You're either playing them from the oscillators using sequencers, voltage-controlled sequencers, or actually using keyboards and playing the songs out in a stream of consciousness type of style. And this album is very interesting in that in a world where, people want perfection, we're kind of going for a stream of consciousness, feel-based work that we've been kind of promoting since 2016 when we started Fam Electric Ghost. So one of the songs we're going to show is a song we just wrote over the weekend called Fern Life Rules. And our SoundCloud Fam Electric Ghost has this entire album in the demo form, which is called Polypodiophyta. And we'll put the link on here when we're done. But we're going to play an audio track from this. This is a demo track from this new album called Fern Life Rules. So that's just a little preview, and that song is particularly a Moog affair, but it's got a lead line coming from an Arturia Mini Brute 2S and using a Juno GI through MIDI to play the keys of that Arturia. But the drum beat is coming from a DFAM, and the bass lines are coming from a Mother 32. These are all Moog analog songs. So those are three analog synthesizers being used to create a song in an age where most people are using plugins. Now, an example of a song that we used some plugins from the Akai Force, but we also brought in the Moog Grandmother through the CV capability of the Akai Force. The Akai Force is really good with I/O, input and output. You can bring in other instruments. You can bring in instruments through like 1/4-inch lines. You can bring them in through USB MIDI and controlled voltage. And since the Moog is a semi-modular analog synthesizer, we actually are using, sending in a gate signal from the oscillators using the utilities to combine the two oscillators on the Moog grandmother, and using the trigger end to control the envelope generator. So we actually play the Moog grandmother using the 64 pads of the Ki-Force, which allows us to play it in a way that you don't have on the keyboard. Now, the grandmother has a really good keyboard, but what's interesting is when you use the alternative input mechanism of using the Ki-Force with 8x8 grid of pads to trigger that controlled voltage track. Because what you can do on a Ki-Force, you can take plugins. A lot of people just take samples or you take software sense, but you can actually do a CV track or a MIDI track. Our MIDI track is bringing in a JD08, which is a Roland boutique synthesizer. And the CV track is bringing in the grandmother, which is an analog Moog. And then we have the benefit of having drums from a modern kind of hip hop standpoint. The Kai MPCs and Force products are very good at creating drum beats. But again, we use a drum kit, that's a plug-in drum kit that we built the track from scratch, rather than sampling or looping, which is traditionally what is done today. A lot of times people just sample loops and change them around. But we actually took one of the plug-in drum sets, one of the kits, and used that. So the next song we're talking about is called In Love with a Fern. What was interesting there is I could use the clip-based style of a lot of producers today that use DAWs, but also have the power of an analog synth, not a plug-in, actually using a real analog synth like the Moog grandmother to do the bass line. So the advantage there is, in some cases on this song, I'm doing a clip that I wrote on the Moog. But then when I record this, I'm recording the Ki-Force directly into a Zoom Live Track L8. And then I'm kind of DJing my clips by launching them like the way a DJ launches clips on a CDJ while I'm rolling the tape. I'm rolling the live track in record mode. And let's say I've got 8 clips that I've set up with drum beats, bass lines, all kinds of things. And then I'm kind of bouncing them around or queuing them up and kicking them off at different points. So I'm kind of stream of consciousness recording like a DJ, but directly to the multi-track. On top of that, because I'm in a multi-track mode, I can actually go and set up a clip that's open and actually play live my Moog grandmother bass lines. So I can go in and play the bass line or let it run from the clip. In some cases, I change the key. In some cases, I change the cutoff. I do some of the kind of control using the controls or playing the filter. I can actually go do that while I'm recording and actually take advantage of the capability of an Ki-Force to do these tight drums, but then take in the analog capability of having a Moog grandmother and playing with the modulation, playing with the oscillators, playing with the mixer, playing with the utilities and the filter and the envelope and the spring reverb, all in real time, which gives you a stream of consciousness kind of point-in-time recording, even though you're using tools that are kind of designed to be able to repeat consistently your track in a way that, is recognizable. I try to break it and do it in a way that's not exactly recognizable and is at point in time its own kind of sound painting. At that moment, it is what it is. And that's one of the things I like to do in expansive sound is kind of challenge the process to do it that way. And so, the songs become their own pieces of painting, sound architecture. So one of the other songs I'm going to play that I like a lot that's on this album is, I'm going to get into, I'm looking for the track in my library, but hold a second. There's a song that I did a really interesting bass line on a synth I usually don't do bass lines on. I usually use my Moogs. But I kind of rediscovered my Arturia Mini Brute 2S, which I've had for many years. What's cool about the Mini Brute 2S is the oscillators are on sliders. So you can mix the levels of multiple oscillators all at once, which is different than what the Moog oscillators are not like that. They're usually, on, in some cases, like the frequency for my grandmother is only on oscillator 2, do you control the frequency, and then you have to use a sync to do the control for both of them. What's cool about the slider style is you can mix oscillators between oscillator 1 and 2 on the Arturia with kind of like an ARP 2600 level or like a Juno 106, which gives you a different style, different sounds. You can get to the same places, but you kind of get to new places. So I'm going to play the song called Experience Polypodiophyta, which is part of this concept album, Polypodiophyta, the album about ferns. And this has got a very interesting bass line that people would have thought is a Moog, but it's an Arturia Mini Brute 2S. So what's interesting again is you got a Moog DFAM doing this very industrial beat. And we're also using a math module with a Mother 32 to create some dissonant electronic sounds that are kind of going through portamento through a maths module, which is a really, Make Noise makes this really interesting module for Eurorack synths called a maths module that lets you do logarithmic and exponential processing of signals so you can create your own oscillators, reprocess audio from other oscillators, run them through envelope generators, run them through like very long envelopes or short envelopes, or to make things very dissonant. 9 Inch Nails is famous for using the maths module on a lot of their albums. It creates, a lot of kind of industrial noise. It takes signals and kind of fractures them and adds a lot of distortion, kind of what a guitar player does with a distortion pedal or a phaser or any of the pedals from Boss the guitar player uses. The maths module lets you kind of do that to your analog or digital synth signals and kind of reprocess them before they actually hit the tape. And a lot of times what I'll do a trick is actually running an LFO to the cycle feature of the maths module and either make it a slow LFO or a fast LFO, and it will actually trigger bringing that signal in and allowing it to be in a logarithmic or exponential format and summing it or not summing it or doing different things that you can do to actually kind of distort it and make it, dissonant. Kind of difference between a Juno 6 and a Jupiter. And the Jupiter 8 is very musical, and Jupiter 6 is very dissonant. The math module allows you to create a lot of dissonance, which you can kind of hear in that bass line. But on top of it, a bass line is very, Entwistle-like, very kind of chord-like, it's very powerful. It's kind of cutting through everything. It's at a bigger bandwidth, or it's taking up more headroom than the rest of the mix. But this is like part one, because this is a very long album. We just wanted to point out those songs. We're gonna get one more song, which is like one of the title songs when we created this whole project. We're gonna go and find one of the other songs from the project that we like a lot. Again, this is Polypodiophyta, which is an album that we've got on a playlist, which is a structure of what we want the album to be. And we're gonna play like the title track, Polypodiophyta, which this song is a total Moog affair. It's a grandmother, it's a mother 32, and it's also the DFAM, and it's used to create a very interesting pattern using the mother 32's 32-step sequencer. That's why it's called a 32, and it's analog oscillator, again being manipulated by a math module for make noise, recorded directly onto a Zoom R20, which we like a lot because it does really good separation of the audio from different signals that come into it. You can get your own clips for each input coming into it. So this is the last song we'll talk about today from this record, called Polypodiophyta.
Polypodiophyta is the shit. Undress, well, his anatropic is the shit. Polypodiophyta is the shit. Polypodiophyta is the shit. Anatropic, well, his, she's lit, undressed, she's the shit. Polypodiophyta is the shit. In the tropics, she is lit. In the little death, in the air. Yeah, the he and him, and the she, and them. Polypodiophyta is the shit. In the tropics, she's lit.
Okay, so that's Polypodiophyta, and what's interesting is that's a sequence on the Mother 32. And what's interesting on the Mother 32 is like we've got it going in kind of a mode where you're hitting each individual note and in a very without sustain. And then what we are able to do is actually put the VCA mode totally on. Sometimes we have it going through the envelope generator. So when you go through the envelope generator, you can make it very snappy and you hear each individual note. When you go to on, it goes into a continuous sustain. So then that structure, that song, as we recorded it onto the R20, we actually went back and forth between the VCA on and the envelope generator on. So you have the more individual notes triggering in the envelope generator mode, and then the kind of flowing of the VCA on as a sustain of those notes in a constant sustain. So that's the album. You can check the link for Polypodiophyta. It's a playlist on our SoundCloud, Fam Electric Ghost. Check it out, and we'll talk to you guys later. So this is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're talking about our latest album, and this is going to be part 2 of Polypodiophyta. Polypodiophyta is our next record, and one of the things that is interesting about this record is we're using hardware synthesizers like the Moog Grandmother, which is a semi-modular synthesizer, using a hardware DAW called an Akai Force, which takes the power of an MPC, but then gives you the ability to play it with a 8x8 grid of pads. And then we're using a synth called the JD08. We're also using a Moog analog drum machine on this record called the DFAM, Drummer from Another Mother, and another analog Moog called the Mother 32, and an analog synth from Arturia called the Mini Brute 2S, along with our Juno GI from 2008 that we still have. And the thing about this record is it's a lot of stream of consciousness, a lot of just play by feel, just kind of jam band style stuff. So one of the songs we're going to do right now is a brand new song we did today. One of the newest songs on the album. It's called Emerald Fern Freeway. And this whole album is about every song's got the word fern in it, or the concept of fern life, or fractals, and the idea of plant life in the world. And it's kind of in that vein is the whole record. So we're going to play this new song, and you'll get to check it out. And so we're back on the mic, and that was Emerald Fern Freeway. And we're going to stop for a second because that's the next song. So we've been working on a lot of new material. And one of the cool things about that song is the combination of using a Moog grandmother for the bass lines and analog synthesis, but the drum capability of the Akai Force is very good. It's got a lot of awesome plug-in drum sets. I don't sample, but I actually played the drum sets. I usually set up 12-bar loops and then create drum patterns with those 12-bar loops, and then kick them off with different lanes within the kind of Ableton workflow of this Dawless Akai Force. And what I've got integrated is I've got, through controlled voltage connection, integrated in and out of the grandmother into the Akai Force. So I actually use the pads to play the grandmother. And like I said, there's 8x8 grid. There's an 8x8 grid where you have touch pads and you can actually play the notes from the keyboard, which actually is a more of a range, a bigger range than the 32 key keyboard from the grandmother, because I've got these 64 pads that I can cross different octave ranges and do stuff that I can't do with the keyboard on the grandmother. So that's very cool. And so that song is interesting in the structure of it. It's something we've been really into for a while, is combining the ability of having an analog Moog but then having digital drums, and that's kind of useful. And then we also have a way to connect through MIDI the Roland JD08, which is a very interesting digital synth from the 90s that got recreated in the boutique format, which means it's actually a miniaturized version of a J800. J800 was a very big synth in the age of digital synths that had controls kind of like a Moog, mini Moog, or even like a Jupiter 8, where Roland had gone away from having the controls when they made the D50. When they did the D50, it had a joystick, but it didn't have a lot of controls. You had to menu dive, and that was kind of a pain. And one of the things that a lot of the analog people complained that they liked the controls of a Jupiter or a 106. You can see that Roland's brought that back with the Jupiter X and the Jupiter 8. They brought back the control schemas from the 80s and 70s. And that's kind of like the new thing in hardware synths, is to have the 1970s and 80s control surfaces with the reliability of modern tech, of having like DCOs or FPGA chips to mimic analog, or even with Moog, they actually have pure analog. But Roland has kind of a version of FGPA with their ability to recreate their synths with digital technology. They've got their own capability there. They have analog behavioral modeling, and they also have Zencore. Zencore goes beyond analog behavioral modeling, where analog behavioral modeling sometimes limited what the polyphony could be. On some of the boutiques, you could only do like 4 notes at once. But the Zencore implementation of those old analog synth designs through plugins that you can get on the modern Rolands allows you to have layers that you couldn't have on an analog synth. Like if you get a Jupiter X, you can have 4 Jupiter X's layered on top of each other. 4, Jupiter 8s, which you can't do on a Jupiter 8 analog synth. So you have 32 note polyphony on a synth that was 8 voices. So that's kind of cool. And that's getting kind of technical, but that's the reason why sometimes digital is better than analog when you have capabilities like that. You have the ability on some of these modern synths to have 256 voices all at once. So you have 32 Jupiter 8s, tons of SH01s and J800s and XB5080s, and they can do a lot of cool stuff. So all at once when you're trying to create layers or, sound paintings that have layers, you kind of want to be able to have enough polyphony so you can actually hear the articulation of the notes. And that's kind of what we do as musicians, especially electronic musicians or producers, and trying to get at the core of the feel or the color of a song. So Polypodiophyta is a kind of a really interesting record that we've been creating. It's out on this playlist on SoundCloud. We'll include the link. My computer's giving me some trouble today. I don't know why. But I'm going to go grab another track that I find is interesting. One of the first tracks we wrote here for this album was a song that we called Pedality. So we're going to play the original version of this song, and we'll get into it right now. So this is more from the album out there, going to be, well, it's on SoundCloud. It's a playlist. We're working on putting it out as a record. It will get distributed. Because we're a SoundCloud artist, and we can actually push it out to all the platforms like Spotify and Apple and Tidal and all that. Now, another song we were working on is called What, which we wrote maybe 2 days ago. And we're going to get into this song. It's got interesting use of a grandmother and a Chi Force again. But what you just heard there was the use of the DFAM. You can tell the difference. If the DFAM is more industrial beats, it's kind of limited in its beat structure, but we take advantage of what we can do with it. So, but this song is going to use the beat capability of an Akai Force, which is a lot more varied, and you can see that right away when we play What. So we're gonna seg out today, and you've been listening to Fam Electric Ghost. You can get into our music. It's kind of strange and different. We'll kind of go off with the last song that we'll get into. It'll play D Fam and D Tune. It's another D Fam song. So this is Fam Electric Ghost signing off. Check out Newsly. Use coupon code GHOST for 1 month free premium subscription. Check it out. Start listening and stop scrolling. Check out Newsly, coupon code GHOST.